Hi, and welcome to Dentistry 101. Today we have the pleasure to have Dr. Giselle Neiva talk about digital dentistry. Dr. Neiva is a clinical associate professor at the University of Michigan School of Dentistry, and she's the director of the Graduate and Respiratory Dentistry program. So, Dr. Neiva, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. My pleasure is to be here. Thank you.
Okay. So we just saw a small video about your program, and can you really describe a little bit better about what's the video and the technology involved in that video?
Sure. So what you saw on the video was basically a demonstration of different types of equipment that we use pretty much day to day for clinical care. Basically, they're scanners, so then we capture the intraoral geometry of teeth or how teeth can be modified, and then that information goes to a computer program that has the capability of not only digitize that information, but also play with that information or distort it or morph it so as to best fit the future, inform the future crown for that patient. So we use that pretty much every day to form restorations, and we have the capability of delivering them on the same day. So the technology that you saw in the video are pretty much what we use in the program, in the grad program.
Okay. And how did that technology change your day-by-day work?
Okay. So it definitely, when we decided to make that decision and to incorporate technology into teaching and into clinical dentistry, we wanted to make sure that technology was going to help us expedite things, make things more efficient and more precise and better. So, and that's what we've been able to accomplish. So it was definitely a learning curve. Every time you're introducing something new, obviously there is resistance from the staff and the faculty that don't quite dominate the technology. The students always jump in at it because it's new and they almost are learned these days with these abilities. We're exposed so much. But it definitely didn't come in to make things more complicated, but rather simplify our day-to-day operations and the whole process and workflow for restorations for the patients.
Okay, and this new technology, or this emerging technology, how did it change in the patient perspective itself?
Okay, so we are very fortunate to have a group of patients that seem to be very intrigued by it. So, there's no resistance whatsoever. If you imagine, if anything, when you ask anybody, any lay person, about the dentist, most people really don't have good experience. They relate experience such as goopy impressions, temporaries that fall off, and the teeth are sensitive. So these technologies, they eliminate all of that, because instead of a goopy impression material that you have to almost choke on, you have a slim digital camera that rapidly captures that image. And then there is no need for a temporary, so that artificial piece of material that is placed in your mouth and not always fit exactly how it's supposed to, and sometimes gets dislodged. So there's no need of that, because the restorations after they're scanned, they're digitized, and the information is sent then to a subtractive mill. We mill them in-house. Takes about only 4 to 5 minutes, and then we adapt it to the tooth and do any final adjustments in cement. So the patient walks out of the door in an hour and a half with the final product. So none of that goopy impression, none of the temporaries that may fall off in the parking lot, and so the last thing that we've been successful in recording and actually even publishing about is how this restoration actually caused these teeth not to be as sensitive, because I guess the tooth structure is not then is exposed to saliva, to bacteria, so they're sealed in the same day. So those are the aspects that the patients tend to observe and appreciate very much.
Okay. And besides that technology we saw in the video, which other emerging technologies can you show with us or discuss with us?
So this is a very volatile field. Think about how often do you update your phone? Very often.
That's right.
So things are changing every other week, every other day. There's new inventions coming down the pike faster than I can't even catch up with. But the trends are, we know, and there is common use of digital 3D printers for multiple applications. We don't so much use that for dentistry quite yet. It's not because the digital printers are not developed, it is because the dental materials are not to the quality that can withstand the oral environment. So I feel like the research in this field is going to go towards developing the materials that will withstand in the intraoral environment, and the printers are going to become more accurate and precise. There's also, in my bucket list, there's always a wish, as a dentist, that we get the capability of reading, of what happens underneath the tissue. Mm-hmm. So I know that there are some talks about that, some technologies that can see through without exposing patients to radiation. So there is an inordinate amount of different lines that have been developed, and are in developing stages for that respect.
That's all very interesting. And also, you know that the University of Michigan, the School of Dentistry, is one of the top research institutions in the country, and we value a lot research. So my question to you is really how this new emerging technology will impact the clinical research.
Mm-hmm. So the impact has started some years ago and it is going to continue. And it's basically because once you incorporate these different workflows, there's always areas that can be improved and expedited. There's so many steps along the way that can be perfected. And at the end of the road, what we've been doing for most of the time is materials testing. So there's a limited number of high-strength ceramics that are fabricated for this kind of application. So they come in monolithic blocks of ceramic. They're sintered in an industrial process. And there is a variety of different sources of material. So it could be zirconia based, so plastics, composites, and each one of them handles differently, mills at a different pace. So the algorithms need to be perfected and optimized, and also the clinical handling of the ceramics versus the composites are different. So there's so much that can be done, because when these materials were introduced, it didn't come along in a kit. You use this material with this finishing and this is the result you get. So we're still having to experiment with different things as far as trying to come up with the best final result, and not only for the looks of it, but also for the fit. So I think for the efforts that we have placed in Michigan for our clinical studies have been into fit and accuracy of using these technologies for patient care.
Okay, very interesting. And with all of this technology, do you think the relationship between the dentist and the patient is becoming more impersonal?
Interesting that you asked that, because my personal experience is quite the opposite. What I've learned with these technologies is that in the process of fabricating them, usually the dentist can't interact much with the patient because the patient has their mouth open the whole time, so they can't say much. But with this use of these digital scanners, there is about a 20-minute period in between where the restoration is being morphed and calculated on the screen, and we're adjusting it to fit the patient's dentition, where there's room for conversations. And I often ask my patients, do you want to go to the cafe? Do you want to just sit in the waiting room? And the patients usually say, no, I want to watch what you're doing. You're like, oh, okay, and then what did you do last week? And the next thing you know, and how is your family? And the types of things that we don't do anymore. We used to do in dentistry and got completely dissolved in the business of a day. This forces us to have that 20-minute interaction with the patient. It's usually very pleasant and very positive. The assistants contribute, and the doctors on the other side come and it's like, what are you guys doing? It seems like you're just like chatting here. So if it becomes a very interesting way of bonding with the patient. So I actually have the opposite experience with that.
Okay, and I think many of our listeners will be people that are interested in the dental profession, and I guess they would like to listen from you. What really motivated you to become a dentist?
I'd like to give you the answer you're expecting, but it's not because of any one in particular. It was because of my personal experience as a child having my pediatric dentist. And I'm from a foreign country, and in my country, when you're ready to make your career choices, you are very young. You're 17 years old. And at that time, I had no clue what I wanted to do. And you have to pretty much pick from a list. And the day came, and I had to make a check in one of the boxes, and I was going down and up on that list, had no clue. So then I stopped, and I started thinking, who's the person that I thought enjoyed the most what they were doing day to day, because I figured that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And it was my pediatric dentist, because every time I went to the office, the atmosphere was amazing, and he was always happy, had a big smile, and I don't remember feeling pain there. So those to me were the things that really matter at that time. So I chose dentistry just because of that. But it's proving to be, I think it was the right choice. I've never regretted making the choice so randomly like that.
Very good. And kind of briefly, can you give us an idea what was your training path to become a dentist?
Sure. So after I started it, kind of like in a very unusual sort of a way, I expected that because it was my pediatric dentist that inspired me in a way, that I was going to end up being a pediatric dentist until I got bitten by a child. And that wasn't very pleasant. So that opened a whole new world at what am I going to do? And I guess my story is being open to opportunity. I actually was always really aware of what was current at the moment and what was the best opportunity. And so when I finished my training as a dentist, there became an opportunity came for me to have 1 year advanced training in restorative dentistry and aesthetics back in my country. And that kind of opened my eyes, because at that time I wasn't sure which way to go. From there, I applied to programs in the U.S. and restorative. There's only a few. And when I came to Michigan in Ann Arbor, I knew that's exactly the place I wanted to be. So then I had a master's, 3-year master's program. And then from there, once you go into the master's career, you pretty much prepare yourself for the academic life. And from there on, without much detail, I continued to be involved with teaching. And until later, when in about 2005, I did my second master's in clinical research and biostatistics. So now everything kind of ties in together, the clinical aspect with the research aspect. And then the application of the digital technologies came about 8 years ago for the clinical research aspect of it.
That's very, very exciting for sure. So, Dr. Neva, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Rogério. Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
And thank you all for watching.